About this boy, I think about my own kids. You know, if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. And, you know, I think they are right to expect that all of us as Americans are going to take this with the seriousness it deserves.
When Trayvon Martin was killed by a neighborhood watch volunteer and his story came to national attention, there was at first agreement that his shooting was an outrage that demanded justice. Even well-known conservatives agreed.
The shooting of Trayvon is a terrible tragedy, unnecessary, uncalled for, and inexplicable at this point.
I suspect that justice will be done, and it's a tragedy. And in that sense, you have to understand how much of a tragedy it is for the family and for the young man involved.
The same week that President Obama spoke so movingly about Trayvon Martin, a Rasmussen poll found only 15% of adults thought that the man who shot him, George Zimmerman, acted in self-defense. But as time wore on, things changed. Zimmerman was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. He maintained that he acted in self-defense. And Martin's death became more and more politicized by the right-wing commentariat, men like Glenn Beck and others. 2 months later, the same polling company found that a full 40% believed Zimmerman acted in self-defense, a 25-point increase in people who believed that the shooting was therefore justified. 8 years later, the reaction to the killing of Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia is proceeding along a frighteningly familiar course. For now, even Donald Trump has called the video of the killing very, very disturbing, even heartbreaking. But how long will that last? Joining me now is Karine Jean-Pierre, current Chief Public Affairs Officer for MoveOn.org and the author of the great book, Moving Forward. Jonathan Capehart, opinion columnist for The Washington Post, an MSNBC contributor, and Midwin Charles, a civil, trial, and criminal defense attorney. I'll start with you, Karine. Mother's Day privilege. I'm going to have you go first. We're going to go ladies first, and then we'll have Jonathan go third. Karine, happy Mother's Day. So having covered this case, I was at the Griot at the time and covered it and went down to Sanford. And the atmosphere in the early days of the coverage definitely shifted to where there was mass sympathy, there was broad sympathy and shock that there had not been arrests. And then over time, once President Obama specifically spoke out about it, it was almost like a switch was flipped in this country where the right said, nope, if he says A, we say X. And I wonder if with Donald Trump in the White House, how does that switch work in your view?
Well, first off, let me just give my condolences, my heartfelt condolences to the Ahmaud Arbery family, especially to his mother, Wanda Cooper Jones. On Mother's Day, her son is not here because he was murdered because of the color of his skin. And no mother should have to go through that. Her grief is our grief. Their grief is also our grief, clearly. So here's the thing, Joy, and I've been thinking about this. You know, we've been talking about the coronavirus and how it is an epidemic in this country, which is true. But another epidemic in this country is racism, and it's something that we do not talk about a lot in the mainstream media. And it is the deep-rooted systematic racism that we see in this country over and over and over again. I mean, if you think about the last couple of years, the amount of innocent Black people who have been gunned down, killed, murdered because they were buying Skittles, because they were in their own home, because they were at church, because they had a toy gun and playing cops and robbers, because they were selling CDs, you name it. And this is what's been going on in this country for a very long time. And what makes this even more painful, Ahmaud Arbery's death, is at the same time what we're seeing white people who are armed with rifles, assault rifles, who are standing in front of state capitals saying violently that they were going to take over the government, and police are just standing there. They're just standing there watching. And so this is what makes this so hard to watch. And when you go back to President Barack Obama, what he did is he acknowledged the pain. He acknowledged the racism. He put a national spotlight of what happened to Trayvon Martin. He put himself in the shoes of the parents, understanding that that could have been his son if he had one, as we just heard. And what you have with Donald Trump is he's using his megaphone, as he always does, to stoke racism, and it is a wink and a nod constantly, not even a wink and a nod because it's so bold, to his base. And this is where we are with the partisanship and the division and racism in this country, the history of racism of this country being used by Donald Trump.
Yeah, and I'm going to go to you next, Midwin, on this. And of course, you're our lawyer on set today. And of course, the facts in this case are still open; they have not been adjudicated yet. We await to see how this goes. There have been arrests. That's the stage that we're at, so we should acknowledge that. But the conversation that we're having, I think, is because there are so many sort of similarities in the sense that the timing, this happened in February. It's taken months for anything to happen. There had to be national outrage and people, sort of going on social media and really crying out for there to be arrests at all. And then you have this sort of, back and forth over blame. And you're starting to see a little bit on the right, the creeping in of trying to blame Ahmaud Arbery for his own death. You're seeing that in the Twitter sphere, which again is not real life, but it's happening. What do you make of this, as a lawyer watching this play out?
Well, as an attorney who has practiced for 20 years, the one thing that jumps out at me about this case, and like Karine, I too want to extend my deepest condolences to the family. But the one thing that jumps out at me about this case in particular is the criminalization of Black skin. It's why, and I think Karine expertly pointed out, you could have majority of white men showing up on the Capitol steps with guns, with AK-47s and rifles that we all know can do mass destruction, as we know from a variety of school shootings and so forth. And yet those men can be seen as peaceful. They can be seen as not trying to do anything that's harmful. Whereas a Black man just walking down the street is de facto in the midst of committing a crime. And as you know, these two men said in their defense that they were making a citizen's arrest. However, if anyone takes some time and looks at Georgia's law of citizen's arrest, it's rarely used, and it does not contemplate chasing down someone in a pickup truck with guns saying, "Stop, stop, I want to talk to you." I did some digging and took a look at the law. The law was basically put into place for retailers who wanted to sort of hold someone who was caught shoplifting, for the police to arrive and then for the police to take over and do their jobs. So, racism is the sort of underpinning of this. But as someone who's been practicing law for 20 years, it has to be said that we have a problem with criminal justice in this country in the sense where crimes that are committed by Blacks versus crimes that are committed by whites are treated differently. And also, victims of crime are treated differently based upon their race. As you said in your intro, it took 74 days for these two men to be arrested. We know in America that if Ahmaud Arbery was a white man, a white woman, a white child, it would not take 74 days for there to be an arrest for their murder, regardless of who committed the murder, of who is alleged to have committed the murder. So it's important to constantly be talking about the why, the backdrop, and the framing of these cases, because we have seen far too many over the past few years, and actually for the entire history of this country, but they've been more public thanks to video.
Yeah. And, Jonathan, you and I, we both covered this case, the Trayvon Martin case. And President Obama said first, that if he had a son, he would look like Trayvon Martin, which seems self-evident because if he had a son, he would look like Trayvon Martin, right? And then he said he could be Trayvon Martin. And people found that to be completely unacceptable to say, even though those are self-evident things. With the case of Ahmaud Arbery, as a mom, with Black children, you understand that any of your children could be either of them. Black Lives Matter didn't start with the police incidents of killing Black people. It started with Trayvon. It started with the idea that any civilian can stop, that white civilians have this power still over Black life, that they can sort of act almost like a cop, that they can have this police-like power. This is back again with that. The idea of not just having to fear police encounters, but encounters with anyone. This is 2 trucks full of armed men chasing one guy, right? And you just think about the fear that he must have felt, that Trayvon must have felt, being pursued by someone with a gun. And I think people don't think about that either. It's as if, young Black men don't feel fear. I mean, your thoughts?
Yeah. The burden of being black in this country, and particularly of being a black man in this country, is bearing the weight of other people's suspicions. No matter what we're doing, we've gone through Permit Patty and Barbecue Becky and, black people doing everyday things and then being harassed for it, minimum, killed for it at the maximum. With Trayvon Martin, nighttime, it was drizzling, he was talking on the phone, he was wearing a hoodie, he had just come back from getting Skittles and iced tea, and a so-called volunteer neighborhood watch guy decided that he looked suspicious. He was a suspicious character, and against the advice of police, pursued Trayvon, and Trayvon ended up dead. As a result of that, then there was no video, and as a result of that, a lot of people started realizing and started hearing from people like us, people who live the fear and with the fear, about why Trayvon's killing something that was so important and something that rippled through the African-American community throughout the country. And now here we are 8 years later, and you pointed out the pattern that we're seeing here is so eerily familiar, so eerily similar. Difference, though, Trayvon Martin had only turned 17 maybe a couple of weeks before. Arbery was just about to turn 26 years old. Both instances, the criminal justice system did not pursue justice for them. And so, as a runner myself, although at my advanced age I walk more briskly than I do run, I never leave home. Ever leave home without three things: driver's license, my insurance card, business card written on it in case of emergency. Call this cell phone number, and it's my husband's cell phone number, because I could be in a traffic accident, but I also could find myself in a situation that Trayvon Martin found himself in, or Walter Scott found himself in, or Ahmaud Arbery found himself in, or Jordan Davis found himself in. Is the fear that I live with and that African Americans live with broadly, and African American men in particular live with every day.
Yeah, and it's bad enough to have to fear the police who are supposed to protect and serve us, and you just the thought sort of being confronted by police fills black people with fear. I can't imagine anything more terrifying than being pursued by somebody with a gun. Sorry, it is terrifying. Just the thought of it. So I have, I feel so badly for Ahmaud Arbery's parents, his mom on Mother's Day, Trayvon Martin's mom, Sabrina Fulton. It's just even difficult to put into words how horrifying that has to be as a mom to know that kind of fear it was visited upon your child. It's horrifying. But I want to thank Karine Jean-Pierre, Jonathan Capehart, and Midwin Charles. You guys are great. They're going to all join us later in the show, and more AMDRA after the break.